Hello, and welcome to Halloween, the story you never knew. Probably. I knew that this week I wanted to create a video encompassing the Halloween spirit, but was quite unsure as to how to go about it. My first thought was cryptids, but that quickly ran into trouble as there really aren't a specific creature for the time period. My second idea was making a video about true, scary stories. This idea showed promise, but then it became apparent that the stories I found couldn't be verified and simply could have been the creation of a writer's imagination. Outside of that, many of the true stories were rather grisly and involved some truly heinous murders. Since my channel wasn't about that theme, I couldn't use them. So finally, I settled on today's topic, which is a brief history of the holiday, along with some interesting facts about certain aspects of it that you may have not been aware of. Who would have thought that a channel about paranormal would have had such an issue making a video about the spookiest time of the year? Without further ado, let's get into this. Halloween in general was originally started by the Celtic people in what is now known as Ireland, also northern France and the United Kingdom, over 2,000 years ago. Although the name was different, being called Samhain, it was symbolically celebrated in similar fashion, with people dressing up and the idea of spirits being active at this time period. November 1st was characteristically seen as the start of the new year, with summer officially being over and the start to winter commencing. During this time frame, the change in season was frequently associated with death, which makes sense when factoring a lot of things in nature begin to die as the weather turns colder. On October 31st, when Samhain was celebrated, the worlds between the living and the dead were thought to almost blend together. Due to this ideology, a huge bonfire was lit, and those attending the festival frequently wore costumes of animal skins in order to keep the spirits scared away. In 43 AD, the Romans had conquered much of the area that the Celtic people controlled, and within a few hundred years had incorporated two of their festivals with Samhain. Feralia was the holiday that was celebrated in October, commemorating the passing of the dead, and the other festival was in order to celebrate Pomona, the goddess of fruit and trees, namely apples. If you were curious, this is assumed to be the origins of bobbing for apples. On May 13th, 609 AD, Pope Boniface IV declared that a festival would be set up to honor all the Christian martyrs in Rome, which would be celebrated on May 13th. A few years later, Pope Gregory III moved the date to November 3rd and included All Saints in the festivities, as well as officially making the day All Saints' Day. Very imaginative name, I know. Later on, All Saints' Day would simply be known as All Hallowmas. The night prior, particularly when most of the celebrations took place, was known as All Hallows' Eve, and then shortened to Halloween. Taking a sidestep here, the Spanish Day of the Dead, or Dia de los Muertos, still bases its festivities around the All Saints' Day interpretation. Once Halloween hit the shores of the United States, along with the varying degrees of immigrants from different locations, the holiday started to take its form as to what it is today. Not to mention the Irish immigrants playing a huge part in bringing many of the old traditions back to the festivities. I glossed over a few aspects of the history, as I didn't want to bore you with too much of this information. Not to mention my wife and daughters both warned me about not making this video a history lesson. However, I felt many of the previous facts were too interesting to leave out. Now I want to move on to a few fun tidbits about 4 vital parts to the Halloween traditions. Starting off with the costumes that are so synonymous with October 31st. As previously mentioned, the idea of dressing up came about in a general form with the tradition of Samhain practices in the form of warding off spirits. This fact hasn't always been the case though. The idea of spirits being free to roam at this period of time has been quite prevalent throughout history. Due to this, many households actually feared the intentions as to what these beings were capable of. Families that feared these spirits would frequently don costumes with the hopes of the wandering spirits not recognizing them, or better yet, confusing the masked citizens as fellow ghosts. It should be noted that in many cultures, spirits are not seen as something to fear, and in many instances people welcome them into their homes, or leave food or light candles along the roadways in order to help them find their way back to the spirit world. As usual, there is a reverse side to this tradition, in that some areas people will leave food on their doorsteps as a way to keep ghosts from trying to forcibly enter a person's house and cause mischief. The next topic involves a few animals that are frequently linked with Halloween. Many people decorate their houses with all sorts of trinkets in order to look more festive, and many times pictures of black cats are a common go-to prop. I wonder though how many actually know what the story is behind such a display. The story behind this also ties in with the old superstition of a black cat crossing your path causes you bad luck. During the Middle Ages, cats were seen as synonymous with the devil or evil. I honestly am unsure how this idea originally started, but it was commonly noted that people who were accused of being witches normally also had a cat in their household, frequently black in color. As time passed, cats were quickly linked with witchcraft in the form of a witch's familiar. Familiars are animals or objects that are thought to give a person special powers and abilities when practicing the dark arts. Soon this took on a whole new form, where cats weren't familiars, but were in fact a witch that had shapeshifted in order to avoid detection. And this is why I love the topic of my channel, as I enjoy seeing how stories evolve over time. Back to topic. This latter idea is why black cats were seen as bad luck, being it wasn't a cat, but in fact a witch. The other animal is one that I frequently see, but never gave much thought to until I started researching the topic of this video, and that is bats. When the Celtic people lit the bonfires for Samhain, they would attract many forms of insects, which also brought bats to feed on them. Due to this becoming a common occurrence, the flying mammals were brought into the lore of Halloween as well. It is worth noting that, again during the Middle Ages, bats became a thing of superstition, where people actually feared them as harbingers of impending death. Moving on to our next topic, which revolves around games played during Halloween. If you haven't guessed it, I'm talking about Bloody Mary. Today, the game isn't so much of a Halloween-only type of party practice, as it is done at gatherings throughout the year when it is dark. The story we have today talks about horrific things happening to a person if the entity known as Bloody Mary does decide to show up. Today's version is based on the old Red Queen herself, Queen Mary I, and her multiple miscarriages. Granted, if you read into Mary's history, she was quite a monster, but it is doubtful she is waiting behind a mirror to scare some girls at a slumber party. Frequently, mirrors were seen as a bit of an oddity, and many assumed that they may in fact be a portal to the spirit world. But the true story behind the mirror and spirits, the root for Bloody Mary, isn't sinister at all, and maybe a bit more mundane. Matchmaking was a huge practice around Halloween during the olden days. Actually, matchmaking was prevalent in just about every holiday at one point. The idea was that if a woman were to hold a candle and walk backwards while holding a mirror on October 31st, they may have a chance of catching a glimpse of their true lover's face peering over their shoulder. In a bit of an odd twist, it was also mentioned that a woman could possibly see the image of the Grim Reaper, and if this occurred, it meant they would die before being married. I imagine the Grim Reaper had its hands full on Halloween, with all the young girls dangerously walking around their houses in the pitch black, backwards, holding a lit candle in their hands. On second thought, maybe the woman who saw the Grim Reaper in the mirror was its true love, but sadly, it can never make the connection. On a side note, I made a video a while back dedicated to the Bloody Mary story, and I'll leave a link to it in the description for those of you who are interested. Being I made it a while ago, I'm not sure how good the quality is, but it's there nonetheless. Our last topic is one that many of you have asked me to cover, but as you will soon see, the content isn't enough to make a whole video about, and that is jack-o'-lanterns. The idea of carving faces into produce isn't a new idea, as it was originally started by the Irish. Instead of carving pumpkins like many of us do today, they used turnips. No matter what object is used, the story is based around the same tale of a man known as Stingy Jack. According to the legend, Jack invited the devil to a bar to have a drink with him. When it came time to pay the bill, Jack didn't want to use any of his money, so he convinced the devil to change himself into a coin. That way they could pay, and then he would change back and walk out. Things didn't go as planned, since Jack took the devil, now in coin form, and put him in his pocket, which he had a silver crucifix in there as well. The religious relic made it impossible for the demon to change back, but Jack said he would free him if he agreed to leave him alone for the next year and not claim his soul if he was to die. Satan agreed, and the two parted ways. Somehow, a year later, Jack convinced the devil to climb a tree to get them fruit, and this time Jack carved a crucifix into the tree, again preventing the devil's escape. This time the bargain for freedom was that Jack would be left alone for 10 years. When Jack finally died, he was rejected from heaven due to his stingy behavior, and also rejected from hell due to it being part of their original bargain. Upset with being tricked, the devil gave Jack a burning lump of coal to use to light his path as a soul endlessly wandering the earth. Jack carved out a turnip and placed the coal inside, and to this day is said to be wandering. This ghostly figure was known as Jack of the Lantern, and then simply shortened to Jack-o'-lantern. The tradition of carving out produce and lighting it with a candle was started with the idea of warding off lost souls from one's property. It was thought that Jack would see those lights and flee, thinking it was another lost soul. This story makes me wonder if the origins behind pranksters smashing pumpkins on Halloween came from this story, with the idea of allowing spirits to enter a person's home. As I close out this topic, I want to show you a cool image I found that is from NASA. The picture looks like the sun is in the Halloween spirit as a jack-o'-lantern. It was published in 2014, and they claim it wasn't photoshopped, but I'm unsure. This is NASA. However, it is still really cool to look at. From the bottom of my heart, I want to wish all of you a fantastic and safe Halloween. And also for my Spanish friends and fans, I also wish you a festive Dia de los Muertos. I sincerely hope you all enjoyed this and hope I didn't make anything too dull. I would like to take a moment and thank a few people who have supported me on my Patreon page. So a huge thank you goes out to Joseph Blau, Lena DeBono, and Michael DeBono Artist. I greatly appreciate your contributions and am truly humbled by your support in what I do. If you are new to my channel and have enjoyed the content you just saw, please consider subscribing. As always, clicking that thumbs up button also means a lot to me. With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.